Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing here today. We're going to hear from witnesses who can attest to how the federal government is a roadblock to states and local communities and infrastructure projects, and hopefully develop some ways that Congress can assist in getting the federal government out of the way. And states and localities know the needs of their communities. We want it to increase their ability to handle these projects. They should be trusted to use funds to fulfill those needs with the least federal government interference. Many of these environmental regulations have become irrelevant, outdated, and abused by groups and organizations simply looking to block economic development rather than protect the environment. As Chairman Farenthold mentions, examples of the environmental regulatory burden are the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, and the Endangered Species Act. Policy uncertainty emanating from Washington discourages investment in private infrastructure projects. That is a major part of President Trump's efforts to rebuild and improve our national infrastructure, which will help spur economic growth and provide more jobs. Duplicative responsibility between the states and federal government for planning of federally funded projects. Many projects require state and federal officials to oversee them when only one is necessary, also helps to drive up the cost. In 1956, the year the Highway Trust Fund was established, total federal, state, and local expenditures on administration and research accounted to 6.8% of construction costs. By 2002, that had risen to 17%. And overall, former head of the Federal Highway Administration, Robert Ferris, suggests that federal regulations increase costs by 30%. I think in some projects in my home state of Alabama, we've seen that those costs were doubled. According to one estimate, complying with federal rules raises overhead costs to approximately 25% of project costs, while the overhead costs represent only about 5% of project costs for locally funded roads that do not have to comply with the federal rules. Compliance with NEPA regulations is complicated and involves detailed documentation procedures. If planners do not know whether a project will have a significant environmental effect, an environmental assessment must be prepared. If the assessment finds that a project will have a significant effect on the environment, the Federal Highway Administration must create an environmental impact statement to document the expected effects of any reasonable alternative actions. Because they have to meet so many different requirements, many affected by NEPA, major highway construction projects take as long as 10 to 15 years to complete. For example, California's transportation corridor agencies have spent the last 15 years attempting to comply with federal environmental review process for a toll road under construction. Since NEPA became law, the average time required to complete an environmental impact statement for a federal infrastructure project has increased from 2 years to more than 8 years. The Obama administration recognized the burdensome nature of the NEPA process when it exempted 179,000 stimulus projects from environmental review. The goal, according to the Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, was to get the money out and spend it as quickly as possible. What I would add is that these regulations, particularly the Endangered Species Act, can serve to halt contract projects that have created extensive delays and added significant cost increases, especially on projects that have already started. We're holding this hearing today as part of an effort by Congress to find ways to continue protecting our environment while simultaneously encouraging infrastructure development and economic growth. I look forward to our hearing this morning and how it can play a role in beginning to streamline the regulatory process and devolve control back to the states. I yield back.